Flats was the real victim here. A victim of a society that's riding down a violent road to nowhere. A road I call Violence Road.
Sorry I'm late, class.
Last Dragonborn.
I can't believe you beat up a new student. I'm going to kick your butt!
Miraak says this line to us if you arrive in Apocrypha after defeating Alduin.
So you have slain Alduin. Well done. I could have slain him myself back when I walked in the earth. But I chose a different path.
And this got me thinking as to whether Miraak could have actually done what we did. Of course, because he's as old as dirt, Miraak potentially could have encountered Alduin on several occasions, but it does seem like he made a conscious effort not to directly confront the World Eater. So, were Miraak's words the truth, or were they bravado from a man trying to hide his potential fear that his rival may outdo him? He's got a supreme poker face. Or at least a cool mask. So it's hard to tell if he thinks he's telling the truth. Miraak does seem arrogant enough to believe that he could best anyone, but what do the facts say? Well, let's have a look at it in detail and see how two of Skyrim's most powerful adversaries match up against each other. Miraak vs Alduin. Who would win?
Felling Alduin was a mighty deed, and I thank you for it. He would have proved troublesome to me.
Before we look at this battle, we need to look at the two scenarios in which the pair could have actually fought. Scenario 1 is where we, the last Dragonborn, don't defeat Alduin before confronting Miraak, and after he's freed from Apocrypha, with John Skyrim out of the picture, Tentacle Mask here has to delete the First Born of Akatosh to dominate the world, or accomplish whatever he wants to do. He clearly knows that he would have had to fight Akatosh if his dialogue is to be believed. Scenario 2 is where Miraak doesn't dismiss the Sovngarde trio's approach to deal with Alduin and joins them to end the rule of dragons in Skyrim, or at least end Alduin's rule and maybe put himself as the replacement. These two are worth looking at because both have Miraak and Alduin at different levels of power or means to deal with each other's strengths. Miraak himself seems to have grown considerably in knowledge between his time on Nirn and when we meet him in Apocrypha, which does make sense, given that he spends literal thousands of years learning from the Calamari King himself, Hermaeus Mora. But situation and timing sometimes matter more than sheer power itself. But it is also worth looking at the pair's general power too, before going into detail about the scenarios. So Miraak is the first Dragonborn, and in a way is Alduin's sibling, with the blood of Akatosh running through his veins. He is also a dragon priest, so in terms of enhancement he's like a dragon squared, I suppose. On top of all of that, he's a very competent mage, although arguably not the greatest of his era, with that title going to someone like Arzadar, a fellow dragon priest. When you combine extremely powerful spells with some of the most masterful Thu'um we have ever seen, it's clear that Miraak is packing some biblical heat. Then there's Alduin, the firstborn of Akatosh, fated to eat the world and draw its existence to a close, or at least for a Kalpa / a cycle. He's a literal god, and while not an Aedra, Daedra or Magna Gi, you can find him in almost every pantheon. We know that, even among other dragons, Alduin's soul has special properties, because it cannot be absorbed, and his Thu'um is crazy, which is probably the least surprising thing you'll hear in this video. To give you an idea of what these two are capable of from a destructive point of view, let's have a look at some power feats. Miraak's feats of power are more tangible than Alduin's, and I want to start off with one of my favourite examples. During his last battle before ending up in Apocrypha, Miraak and his forces were confronted by a fellow dragon priest, loyal to Alduin's cult, Valok the Jailer. Valok, based on who he defeated, is probably one of, if not the most powerful dragon priest around. When he and Miraak fought, Solstheim, which was a region in Skyrim at the time, was exploded off the mainland and made into an island. Just let that sink in for a bit. These two fought so hard that, as collateral, enough landmass was blown off the mainland to form an island. And they weren't even trying to do that. That's quite an anime demonstration of force if I've ever seen one. Now, as a note against Miraak, he did lose this fight and had to be saved by Hermaeus Mora, which is why he's an Apocrypha to begin with. We don't have many details about this battle, although it seems to be a clash between Miraak's rebellion forces, which of course included dragons, and the forces of the dragon cult, sent to aid Valok. So perhaps Miraak was fighting an uphill battle here, his forces outnumbered and his dragons overwhelmed. Those details aren't too relevant though, but the sheer level of destruction caused in the fighting is, which shows you how dangerous the first Dragonborn actually is, or at least was. He can also use a 4-word shout, something we haven't seen elsewhere, which can one-shot dragons. Now this wouldn't work on Alduin because of the special properties of his soul, but it is worth noting how far above the average or even more powerful dragons Miraak is. I wouldn't be surprised if he could do the same to Odahviing and maybe even Paarthurnax. Although it took him thousands of years, Miraak had the power and cunning to eventually plan a prison break to escape Apocrypha. Something Hermaeus Mora, who could keep a Daedric prince imprisoned for literal errors, couldn't stop until we, the last Dragonborn, came into the picture as a sort of Deus Ex solution. He started a rebellion in Apocrypha, and I think it's safe to assume that Miraak is more powerful than the last Dragonborn, at least by the time of their first meeting, even after beating Alduin, since he literally has us kneel before him and then boots us out of his house. This leads us to Alduin, who levels Helgen in practically no time at all, despite considerable Imperial forces in the town. Despite being disabled by Dragonrend, 3 of the greatest Nord heroes of all time, and definitely the greatest of their era, were no match for him, needing to use an Elder Scroll to boot him through time, which is basically cheating and at best a draw. For some context on how powerful these heroes were, Gormlaith, whom Alduin turns into a chew toy, had slain 4 dragons alone during that battle. At his full ultimate power, Alduin can eat the world. And I don't just mean the planet Nirn. He will eat all of Mundus, and no one can stop him. Not the Aedra, nor the Daedric princes. So yeah, it's probably best we stopped him when we did. It's not like you guys avoided the main quest or anything. Right? Right? Anyway, what you need to know is that we're dealing with some of the heaviest hitters in not just Skyrim but the Elder Scrolls, and while Alduin does have the power advantage here, which he has over practically everyone, Miraak is a Dragonborn, a being sort of built to defeat him. Thus that leads us to Scenario 1. Could Miraak have beaten Alduin after the events of the Dragonborn DLC?
You do not even know our tongue, do you? Such arrogance, to dare take for yourself the name of Dova.
So, Miraak either defeats us, or we spend so much time ignoring both Dragonborn and the main quest that he ends up breaking free and finds himself in a situation where he has to be the one to face Alduin. Could he beat him? Well, it depends on a few factors. One, it depends on whether Miraak knows Dragonrend. In-game, Miraak's arsenal of shouts includes Become Ethereal, Cyclone, Dragon Aspect, Fire Breath, Frost Breath, Unrelenting Force, Whirlwind Sprint, and that 4-word Dragon Deleter. I do want to point out that we know this isn't everything Miraak can use though. Bend Will is kind of his whole thing, but you'll notice that he isn't programmed to use this shout in the game, mainly because there would not be a point in him using it here. There's no point in coding it into his boss fight if there's no real reason for him to use it in said boss fight. With all of his knowledge, I also think it's pretty safe to assume that he knows nearly every shout we can find on word walls, since he was not only a dragon priest, but a dragonborn, and had near unlimited access to learning more shouts, plus his draconic rebellion gave him plenty of souls to drink up. The thing is, Dragonrend is a bit of a special case. It was invented by humanity, and the only people he could have learned it from, the Sovngarde trio, are the exact people he rejected. Now there is a very, very slim chance he could have learned Dragonrend from Hermaeus Mora, but given his arrogance and that there was almost no way to know Alduin would come back, I doubt Miraak would have gone out of his way to learn this shout. If he ever needed to fight a dragon, he already had one of the best tools to deal with them, his 4-word auto-deleter. Plus, he could just bend their will to make them serve him, so what would have been the point of learning Dragonrend, unless he planned to fight Alduin, but again, how could he have known he was going to come back? Now sure, he could have learned of Alduin's wall in Apocrypha, if Hermaeus Mora recorded that knowledge at some point, which is pretty safe to bet he probably did, but Miraak's title was the first Dragonborn, not the last, and even if he knew about the wall, he probably would have thought he'd have a long time before Alduin's return. Could he have learned about Dragonrend after escaping? I'd guess not. The last time Miraak asked for help, he got stuck in the land of books and tentacles for thousands of years. Plus, as I said before, he's arrogant enough to believe he's got enough juice to deal with Alduin with what he's got. So, could Miraak beat Alduin without Dragonrend? That's a question with a simple answer. No. There's no way of defeating Alduin without it, and thus the win condition becomes whether Miraak can make Alduin retreat to Sovngarde, so he can get the Sovngarde trio to Dragonrend him on his behalf. He could get to Sovngarde without much problem. He could just spam bend will until a dragon with the right status took him to the Sovngarde portal, and at that point, Miraak probably could have done what we did. The main problem here would be getting past Sun at that whalebone bridge, and whether Miraak's status as the first Dragonborn, despite all of his transgressions, could get him into the Hall of Valor. I'd like to think so though, since we can commit crime after crime and still get in the Hall purely based on our birthright. The thing is, has he got enough in him to scare Alduin enough to get him to do a runner, as Billy Butcher would put it? I don't think so. All of his forces from Apocrypha probably wouldn't be much help, and Alduin is a literal god. He's eternal. Theoretically, all other gods bar Anu, Padme and the Magna Gi should fear him. He'll eat everything that they've created. It doesn't seem like he's at his most powerful at any point in Skyrim, since we're told that he has gone to eat the souls in Sovngarde to gather strength, and there are still plenty of souls left by the time we get there. Perhaps Miraak believed his auto-dragon delete shout would be enough to get the job done, but Alduin's soul cannot be absorbed. He's different from other dragons, including us. We absorb Miraak's soul after all. Either way, Miraak likely didn't think that it would be easy to defeat Alduin, since he says that the World Eater would prove troublesome for him, thus the exact quote.
Felling Alduin was a mighty deed, and I thank you for it. He would have proved troublesome to me.
This could mean Miraak had a plan up his sleeve somewhere, a tool to make Alduin feel the mortality of humanity in his own way, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of evidence for this. It doesn't seem like all the stuff given to him by Hermaeus Mora would help much either, although again that's assuming Miraak didn't have some super special secret plan that we have no way of knowing about. So unfortunately, if Miraak had faced Alduin in the modern day, or well 14 years ago when Dragonborn came out, he would put up a great fight, but he would eventually fall. Round 1 goes to Alduin, but what about scenario 2? Could Miraak have defeated Alduin when approached by Hakon and the rest? Well, let's have a look.
They wanted to use me to deal with Alduin, Hakon and the rest. I chose otherwise.
So this scenario is more complicated than the first one, as we're not clear on the timeline. We don't know when Miraak first started meeting up with the Calamari King and when Hakon and the rest, as he put it, came to him. Although given that Hakon was probably in his 30s when he faced Alduin, his encounter with Miraak probably wasn't that long before Valok came to deal with the first Dragonborn, at least in the context of Miraak's very long life. For some extra context, one of Miraak's dragon priests, who was part of his rebellion, actually came from Sarthal, the first city founded by Ysgramor, the prior mentioned Arzadal. This would make Arzadal probably older than 1,000 years by the time of the Dragon Wars, and while Miraak is definitely younger, since his race is listed as Proto-Nord, not Atmoran, he was probably several hundred years old before Hakon's approach. There's no way of knowing how long he and Hermaeus Mora were working together for, although it's clear that he had the Bend Will shout sometime before his monumental L to Valok, as he had an army of dragons on his side. So I'm going to assume Miraak had Bend Will and the Make Dragons Go Boom shout when Hakon came to say hello, and that he had raised his own forces as well, having been in contact with Hermaeus Mora for at least some period of time. Mora does say everything Miraak knows is from him, but that's clearly an exaggeration. He definitely got a lot of stuff from being in the dragon cult, and thus this stuff would still be part of his arsenal. This means that in my mind, if Miraak had decided to work with Hakon and the rest of the Nords to deal with Alduin for his own plans of domination, this would give him the weapon he needs to get the job done: Dragonrend. Considering that we learn Dragonrend by hearing it once, I think it's safe to say that Miraak could learn it in no time at all, and that's assuming he'd even need to learn it. Feldir the old plan would go as normal, bring the Elder Scrolls as a backup, but the main goal would be to Dragonrend Alduin at the throat of the world, then have Miraak blow him up. If Miraak were to bring his forces to bear, and this quartet caused him enough trouble, Alduin would be forced to come out as before, and at this point the win conditions stack up favourably on Miraak's side. Now there is a chance he's super arrogant and just rolls up on the throat of the world alone, but at this point he'd be a fool not to at least learn Dragonrend, and he probably does enough to make Alduin do a runner. If he worked with the Sovngarde trio, then he's joining up with extremely powerful Nord heroes, and with Miraak's help and a healthy dose of Dragonrend, Alduin probably gets blown up then and there. Even if that doesn't work, the Elder Scroll method of booting Alduin through time gives Miraak a draw at the very least. Even if there is a chance that Alduin escapes the fight to go to Sovngarde as he does in the events of Skyrim, he's probably not all that safe there either. The reason he didn't flee during the Dragon Wars is that, even after getting Dragonrended, there wasn't a way for the Sovngarde trio to beat him. They simply weren't powerful enough and just didn't have the means. I still take the stance that using the Elder Scroll was a draw at best. Still, even if that happens, Miraak's Bend Will shout could grab one of Alduin's allies and fly everyone over to Sovngarde. Sure, Odahviin could only take one person, but Miraak has dragons in his ranks. All he'd have to do is bend the will of one knowledgeable dragon to see where Alduin went, then fly everyone to the portal to Sovngarde to bin Akatosh's firstborn. Those four end up in Sovngarde, blow Alduin up, then Miraak goes home to try and start his own dragon empire, or something. Actually, do we know what exactly Miraak wanted to do? Still, this is all assuming that truly defeating Alduin is even on the cards. John Skyrim stuffs him full of magical C4 and detonates his ass to high heaven, but there are theories that this may not have been enough to truly do the job.
It is done. Alduin, Dilon. The eldest is no more. He who came before all others, and has always been.
Alduin eats the world. He's done it before, and for a new world to start is implied that he's going to do it again. Weirdly, throughout the main story, it doesn't seem like a beard meets food video is on the dragon's mind, and he's more interested in re-establishing his draconic empire. Paarthurnax states that Alduin has gone from Akatosh's intentions, and while he believes that the last Dragonborn has saved the world from being eaten, or at least temporarily, even Paarthurnax doesn't seem entirely convinced that Alduin is out of the picture forever. We don't absorb his soul, the one way to deal with a dragon, and Alduin is a proper god. It's extremely hard to slay a god, especially if they're not one of these mortals that have been made immortal. And even Lorcan, the god known for being dead, still made appearances after his death. Many have theorized that instead of saving the world from being eaten by Akatosh, we, John Skyrim, have actually just factory reset him, like a bad iPhone, making him into what Akatosh wanted in the first place. Someone to end time and start it again. Now I do want to preface that this remains a theory, albeit an extremely popular one, and this would mean that there is no defeating Alduin. We didn't really do it, and that would mean Miraak can't either. But this is also a good point to mention something else. Something that a lot of power scalers on YouTube tend to gloss over. Circumstances can often matter more than pure power. Miraak is more powerful than the last Dragonborn on their first meeting, and we don't even land the final blow during the fight at the peak of Apocrypha. Hermes Mora ends the fight, and I am of the belief that we only end up more powerful than Miraak after we absorb his soul. But this power doesn't really help him in a fight against Alduin because the power gap is too wide. As Dragonborns, both John Skyrim and Miraak are uniquely suited to facing Alduin bypassing that power gap, but only with Dragonrend. Without it, Miraak still has a way to go to match Alduin, and we see this when he's beaten by one of Alduin's dragon priests, someone whom the last Dragonborn handles quite easily. There are some circumstances in which Miraak can learn Dragonrend in Apocrypha. I wouldn't be too surprised if Hermes Mora had that knowledge written somewhere, since he gives Miraak shouts you can't find elsewhere. If this is the case, then sure, Miraak could get the job done. He's stronger than the last Dragonborn was when they faced Alduin, provided you do the main quest and the Dragonborn DLC in order. And Miraak's potential banana skin this time around would be his arrogance and not having people help him, as they did with the last Dragonborn. But the question of Dragonrend remains the decider, and it doesn't seem like Miraak is showing us any signs that he knows the shout. To be honest, Miraak doesn't show us much of anything. I've always wanted more from Miraak, and if you do too, then I have a video discussing that, because he really doesn't say or do too much. But based on what we know, I don't think he would have what it takes to defeat Alduin without a lot of help, and Miraak is not a man who asks for help. And thus I proclaim that no, under most circumstances, if Miraak is acting like Miraak, Alduin would defeat him.
Alduin's wings, they did darken the sky. His roar fury's fire, and his scales sharpened scythes.
I hope you enjoyed this scenario-esque video. I'm looking to maybe add some Elder Scrolls what ifs or versus scenario videos to this channel, so let me know if you want to see more of them. They're not as heavy as my lore videos, and as you can probably tell, nowhere near as long, so they make for a good double upload week. The Nereverian versus the Last Dragonborn is an obvious versus one, but I was also thinking of whether the Ebony Warrior could defeat Harkon, if John Skyrim couldn't be bothered I guess, or if potentially the last Dragonborn was sent during the Oblivion Crisis rather than during the time of Skyrim. Could he perhaps have stopped the crisis? Let me know if these interest you and if you have any more ideas. As promised from this poll that I did earlier last week, the Falmer video is next, so keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, please do the whole YouTube ritual of liking, commenting and subscribing, and hopefully I'll see you in another video down the line.